Jon Jones, controversially, but Jon Jones retains his UFC light heavyweight title. He wins a unanimous decision in Houston, Texas. The scores were 48-47, 48-47, 49-46. That means two judges had it 3 rounds to 2 for Jon Jones. One judge had it 4 rounds to 1. All right, Brian Campbell.
Yes.
Let's get into this. I talked a lot about this on the weekend on YouTube on my personal platforms, so I would love to hear from you. First question is this. 1, how did you score it? 2, is it a robbery?
48-47 was my scorecard for Dom Reyes. Was it
which rounds?
Rounds 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
4 and 5 for Jon. I agreed with what you said and dissected. Spoiler alert, Professor Salt and Pepper was there saying, look, 1, 4, and 5, can't argue them. They're clear. 2 and 3 are sort of the closer competitive rounds. Robbery is always such a tough word in this spot. Was this a robbery? No, a robbery, it sort of teases the idea of corruption mixed with ignorance, right? I think this is just a little bit more of ignorance. Boxing fans were uniting Saturday night going, oh, now welcome to the Terror Dome. It's called Texas, right? Texas forever. I mean, clean heart, full eyes, can't lose.
Ask you,
actually, you can lose because Dom Reyes did, and he should have won that fight.
What was the Paulie Malignaggi fight where he went crazy on the Texas?
The first one against Juan Diaz. And, boxing is full of shit, man. I used to love this sport. Great quote by Paulie, by the way. Look, here's the deal. We're already stuck in a world in MMA, in UFC, at the highest level where we are using an archaic boxing scoring system. State by state, the commissions change the rules on so many things anyway, as you saw Saturday night with Texas using an archaic rule set. But the fact that they still haven't figured out at the highest level. We see decisions like this in boxing all the time, whether it's straight up corruptness or whether it's just it's just a combination of it all. Usually in MMA at the highest level, they get it right. I think this was just not ready for primetime judges in a state that isn't, always in the top loop in terms of getting the top fights. Yeah, you'll see pay-per-views in Dallas every once in a while, but I think you just saw people who didn't necessarily fully grasp what they were watching. Now, I don't want to sound like an angry, stupid hypocrite here. It was a close fight in the end. Jon made a huge rally, and if you had it 3 rounds to 2 for Jon Jones, you're not like, let's kick you out the door here,
right.
Okay? You could have preferred certain things, but I went back and rewatched rounds 2 and 3 multiple times, as I'm sure you did, and came away with the same thing. I don't see how you give Jon Jones a second round. I really don't.
I agree.
We are scoring damage at the end of the day. Reyes came forward for most of that round. He did much more activity. It just seemed like that was a pretty clear round. Wasn't one-sided, but it was clear.
Right.
Round 3 is the problem round. But even within that, Luke, it's like, are we just going to score for Jones because he looked bad in the first 2 and because he came forward in the third? He wasn't landing damaging shots. I thought that in a very tactical round, which round 3 was, Reyes was doing the better work. He was smartly mixing in body shots. At every turn, he was filling in gaps with activity. I just think in the end, you could have it both ways, but you got to sit there and say, what do you prefer more? And if you're giving round 3 to Jon Jones, you're only giving it to on the idea that he pushed the fight forward. But it's the same thing as giving it to somebody who gets takedowns but does nothing with it. I think we're advanced past that point where you're not just scoring activity anymore or intention. You've got to score damage and things that actually happen. So I think this was scored under the wrong precepts. I think it was scored under, old boxing judge transferring over to MMA, which is sort of the long-held thing that people criticize whenever there is a bad decision. I know we can't have UFC-controlled judges. There's an impropriety factor there.
It's also illegal.
It's illegal, you get it. But we need something different than the boxing state commission of each state pretending even 25 years into the sport that they really know what they're doing with MMA. Yet MMA is still jungled under the state of boxing commissions for every state. It's not like they have a separate MMA team, right? It's just sort of just thrown together. I could hear an argument on changing the scoring system. That'd be fine. But even under this scoring system, can we just get MMA experienced people? Can we get ex-fighters?
The thing is...
So that's why even though when you say, I would rather have UFC oversee this, you can't because they're the promoter and you don't want any sort of fear that they're paying or manipulating it, whatever. But I would rather have an MMA organization be able to hire, fire, demote, promote people that are actually doing their job based on performance.
Right.
Because fight to fight, I mean, it happens on the undercards all the time in UFC. We don't make a big deal of it, but we are just seeing scorecards like 4-1 for Jon Jones that make 0 sense.
This is a complicated one. And I know folks think it's not. And folks are like, oh, what's the point in bitching about it? Nothing will change. I never understand that attitude. It's like, Are you the kind of person that when the waiter gets your food totally wrong, you just end up, it's like you ordered steak and they bring Jell-O. You're like, yeah, I'll eat the Jell-O. That's fine. I have no problem. Who are you? Who are these people? Yes, you should say something if something is wrong. I don't understand our attitude at all. Now, how did I score it? I got rounds 1, 2, and 3 for Reyes, 4 and 5 for John. Like you, I can squint and sort of see how somebody could come up with a third round for John. So in that sense, is it a robbery? No, it is not. Do you know who Jon Jones is starting to become? The boxing or the MMA equivalent of, and from boxing? He's like MMA's Canelo, where every time it goes to the scorecards, you think, man, I think this challenger finally got him. And it never, ever happens. The judges just seem to keep finding a way.
So pause at that point right there. Because I want to dig psychologically deeper into this. Is it just that people come in with a preconceived notion? Now, you can't trust anybody on Twitter because they're probably drinking, don't know how to score a fight, have money on a certain person, so whenever they're giving you hate for how you scored
they're fans.
I mean, I get people that are like, how the hell did you give 1 and 2 to Reyes? I'm like, okay, delete, really?
Yeah.
But just for people that actually do know what they're doing, judges that are paid to do it, is it just that they're thinking so much in their mind, Jones is probably going to win this fight, and he's probably going to end up winning dominantly because he's the greatest of all time. And then when round 1 slaps them in the face, and they're like, oh my God, John got hurt, backed up, thrown off his game plan, basically dominated in round 1, right? A shocker. Round 2 was a little bit closer, but Reyes scored the damage. So I guess you got to kind of give it to him, even though 2 of the 3 judges gave that to John as well.
Right.
Is it just by default that when John closes the gap, that subconsciously it's all, well, that's a John round because we thought he was going to win. He started off bad, but look at this comeback. There's no sort of.
Well, let me ask you this. Canelo has a reputation in boxing for being the guy where, for example, this has happened many times, but let's use the first Triple G fight as an example. You went into the scorecards, you think, dude, that guy might have just beaten Canelo. Like, this is a big deal, and then it just sort of doesn't work out that way. Why do you think in boxing, Canelo just seems, again, Mayweather fight notwithstanding, but even in the Mayweather fight,
he got a draw.
He got a draw, which is totally unjustified.
Boxing's got a history. Why did Julio Cesar Chavez get a draw against Pernell Whitaker, right? Like, but
Canelo has this repeated pattern of this
boxing
happening.
Has one of its feet much more dipped into the pool of corruption. It's obvious, right? The house fighter in so many cases ends up getting the benefit of the doubt all the time.
So
it's not just the idea
why can't Jon Jones be the house fighter?
Well, that's the thing. We never have that consistently in MMA. Why do the titles change hands so briskly, so quickly? Because it's largely a fairly contested contest the way things are set up.
Okay, but he's been the champion for forever,
for
essentially.
Canelo specific, there are some blatant Canelo fights where you're just like, I can't even see how the scoring got there. But one thing Canelo does really well is he's economical in his counterpunching, and he lands hard, telling blows.
Right.
And there are a certain subset of judges in boxing who are just always going to recognize damage above everything else. I think in MMA, that's more likely to happen. More often in MMA, do the judges, and they should, recognize damage as a higher form of currency than ring generalship and controlling and making a guy sort of, fight your fight, right? I don't get how the judges missed this. So I'm asking,
I have a theory about
Is it reactionary, though, to he looked better that round, he's the champion, we got to give it to him? I think that's what it's got to be.
I think that's part of it. That's one part. We'll get to another part with the rule set here in just a second. Here's the second part, just about the nuts and bolts of the fight in particular. I thought that Dominic Reyes had a great game plan. You saw it when I did it in Dissected. I encourage everyone to watch. Jon Jones is very hard to land on in his face. It's not easy to land a hook, an uppercut, a straight. He slips, he covers, he gets out of the way, he posts a hand on the shoulder to slip or to just post away like a Heisman. So what Dom Reyes did, a lot of his shots, particularly in that third round, Brian, he went to the body a lot of body shots, a lot of shots to the leg, and numerically he outstruck. But the thing about it was, there was a couple body shots where you could see him go like this and back up, and he gets kicked in the leg, but he combines the fact that he's hard to hurt in the face, or that he's really telling blows, with the fact that he's got a good poker face. When the fight's over, his cornermen have to carry him out because he can't even stand on his own 2 feet. But in the rounds, he's getting kicked in the leg, and he kind of acts like nothing's ever happening. He's very gifted in that particular regard. I think the judges get confused by all of that. Now, in terms of the fight itself, again, I had it 3-2 for Reyes. I can understand how it could go the other way. To me, the bigger consideration here, and this is the second part of this question, which is, should the UFC go back to Texas? And here's my view on this. I understand there's a business consideration involved. One of the Fertittas, I believe, owns that arena, right? The Lorenzo's
Toyota
brother
Center.
or cousin, I can't remember which one it is. The Toyota Center in Houston. Nice venue, by the way. They use an outdated rule system that values forward pressure. Go back and you watch Dissected, which you'll and just see for yourself. It is clear that Dom Reyes built into his game plan, backing up and using lateral movement to draw John into him to then crack him. And it worked to pretty good effect a number of different times. Here's my point. You asked how you can get a 4-to-1 scorecard. We are so used to watching modern fighters with modern games. Under modern considerations, it's just not possible to find 4 rounds for him. 3, I can squint and understand it, not 4. However, if under the old rule set where you are required to value forward pressure, I can honestly see how in rounds 2 and 3 you can say, well, one guy had more damage than the other, but it wasn't by a huge amount, and the other guy was marching him down the whole time. I got to take that into consideration. This is my key point. If the UFC has to go back to Texas for business considerations, I get it. They cannot take a title fight there again. It is not fair. And this is the key to understanding all of that, Brian. It's not that the modern rules have a different view of forward pressure. The modern rules, the key insight is, let's develop a system so that you, Brian Campbell, the fighter, me, Luke Thomas, the fighter, we can develop our own style, and the new scoring criteria will accommodate it if it's effective with damage and grappling and the things that really matter. With the old style, it forces fighters to change the way they fight. You now have to accommodate the forward pressure rule unless you knock a guy out. Otherwise, you are fighting not merely your opponent, you are fighting the criteria. They cannot go back to Texas with a title fight until they change.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that at all, but I think it even goes deeper. Anyone with a boxing background realizes the history of corruption in boxing in Texas, the constant employment of judges and referees who have a long, bad, dark history of screwing up badly, yet some are related to certain commission members. I mean, it's a mess in Texas. It's a running joke. I hope that wasn't the case in this part. I hope it smells like what it looks like, which is just sort of ineptness in the end.
Well, here's the thing.
Maybe not knowing the full concept, and maybe playing into what you're saying on outdated rules, and that's fine.
Let me ask you. The guy who gave it 4 rounds to 1 for John, which again, under the Texas rule system, I can see it, to be honest with you. I don't agree with it, but I can see it.
But hold on. Let me ask you. How can you see it, though?
Again, not under the modern system.
Round 3, yes, but 2.
Dude, honestly,
Reyes came forward in 2 and visibly hurt John twice. Visibly made him back up. Dude. John hasn't back up and run from an altercation since that street corner in Albuquerque that time with the pregnant lady. I mean, look at his career; it's insane.
I hear you. I'm in agreement with you, but I can sort of see it. But here's the point I wanted to ask you about, because honestly, people ask me, and I didn't know what to say. The Judge Solis, I forget his first name, you'll have to forgive me, who scored that 4 rounds to 1 for John. He also gave it 30-27 to Andre Ewell, which I cannot grasp. And here's the real kicker. In the fight between James Krause and Trevin Giles, when Krause had Giles' back for nearly 4 minutes and had multiple choke attempts, a couple of them were pretty tight, he gave that round to Trevin Giles.
Yeah, it could have been a 10-8 for Krause.
Okay, ready for this? That guy is a black belt in jiu-jitsu and has his own MMA school. Square that one for me, because I cannot comprehend that even a little bit.
I mean, there's no hints of corruption in there. It's just ineptness, which takes me back, even with somebody with an MMA background, which sort of fits the criteria. If I'm saying, why are we having old boxing guys do it? There's no accountability at the state commission level. We see it so many times in big Vegas boxing matches, and reporters will go up and call out the Bob Bennett's and say, why is this person still employed? And there's a lot of BS answers. Boxing has... Look, MMA, I always say this, UFC built what it is today on the idea of boxing fans who were sore about what the sport has become, creating this new sport and saying we're going to be completely different and we're not going to do any of those things that get people angry. Well, the closer modern UFC gets to boxing, the more it pisses people off. I think we're starting to see a point that you got to cut it right down the middle right now and create some new system of how you get your judges and your referees and how they are held accountable. Because
but what is that? It's a volunteer army. How do you recruit people to come and train up so they can give away their Friday and Saturday nights for very little money? People keep talking about we got to do this, we got to do that. Okay, by what mechanism? By what mechanism do we actually address this problem? Unless the UFC gives money to state commissions for this or some other entity, I don't know. How people are like, oh, we need an MMA specific commission. Dude, most states, like not named Nevada, not named California, not named New Jersey, they don't have a state budget to pay for anybody else. They can barely send enough regulators to various parts of the states, like in Virginia, for example. If you got a fight that's in Roanoke, fuck, man, that's not easy to staff for your Virginia Department of Licensing and Regulation, whatever it's called. So I keep seeing people like proffer these challenges to it, but they're not realistic. They're just, I keep saying this to people and they kind of dismissed it, which is the big benefit of the UFC running towards regulation is it saved the sport. Good. It is secure. It has a foundation that they cannot take away from it, at least not very easily. The problem is they gave a brand new fetus, essentially, to these state commissions, and now it has grown into an adult, and they don't know how to accommodate for all these new changes, new realities, because they're government bureaucracies. They don't make changes very fast, and they don't make them uniformly.
Money seems to fix any problem, even in fight sports. So I don't know. Do we raise the salary for judges so we get people going after that?
Who's we, dude? Who's we?
At some point, the UFC doesn't want this. UFC does not want this image in which you pay the money for pay-per-view and you watch a fight like you did. And by the way, we just skipped over the fact that Jones-Reyes was an incredible fight.
It was a great fight.
I mean, it was one of the better title fights we'd seen in a long time. You don't want to know that your eyes saw one thing and then you see the exact opposite with the decision. And again, it's not lost on me that the fight was close, again. But that's a boxing thing. That's always about, you want to get away from that. So is it an investment the UFC has to make with more money to get better training and deeper? Maybe that's the key in the end, Luke. I don't know. But I do want to say one thing. This felt and looked a lot like Johnny Hendricks, George St. Pierre.
Yes, it
I
did.
left that fight going, man, they screwed him.
Now,
they didn't
GSP took way more damage in that fight. I mean, he was really messed up in that post-fight presser. Remember that?
Yeah.
The famous photo that Esther Lynn has with the ice pack here and his
And
whole
hearing him
face.
talk, he was very much not with it on there. But I had that same feeling of remorse for the fighter, knowing, and look, it wasn't a robbery again, but they did Dom Reyes dirty in the end. There can be a difference between there. It's not that there would have been a consolation had one judge scored it 3-2 for Reyes, right? Would I feel better sitting here right now? Maybe. He doesn't win anything more in that case, but he deserved at least one judge going, well, hold on, like 3-2 Reyes. The fact that it wasn't is where you get the extra level layers of outcry, because then you can go, see, he never had a chance. See? And I just want to say one other thing for people that still don't understand the idea of round-by-round scoring in either boxing or MMA, because I see a lot of this on like, well, he didn't actually beat the champ, right? He didn't actually go out there and whatever, mixed with, well, how do you win a fight? How do you win a championship when you're running out of gas the last 2 rounds? Please, people, wake up again. Please, it's round by round. It's 5 individual fights within one fight. Can we get that? Nobody waits till the end and goes, oh, John had a better gas tank in the end. He was coming on late. It doesn't matter.
And also, people don't understand this. When the round is over, so round 1 ends, they have to turn in their scorecard, and that's it. They don't get to go back and change it.
I can't deal with any more.
But here's the other part. With the system crashing early on, remember that they were like, how we have to add all this up? And then if you saw the scorecards for the main event, the first 2 rounds were all written by hand, and then the other 3 were written in or printed out in the computer, essentially. And it's like, dude, I don't mean to get into this because I don't want to make a political.
Is this like the 2000 election? Is this
it feels like Gore versus Florida, or Bush v. Gore, whatever it was, all over again. Or the Iowa Democrats, Bernie Sanders. It's just like, oh my God, you cannot go to a commission that does not have its shit together. And Texas does not, on any circumstance.
And I know we can't hold what
together.
fighters say afterwards, but John's saying, look, I think I won that fight. Look what I did in the wrestling at the end. Well, John, you did the wrestling in the 2 rounds in which everyone knows you already won and no one's disputing, and you took him down 4 total times and he got right back up all 4 times. There's not much you can get. There's not a lot of hefty factor in that in terms of the score. In rounds he already won, by the way. So now the question becomes.